Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation, Developing a Métis-led cultural response to HIV, HCV, and other STBBI, grounded in Métis ways of knowing and doing. We respectfully acknowledge that we are presenting on the traditional homelands of the Métis and the Treaty 6 and 7 territories, and in the East in Newfoundland on the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq peoples. My name is Rachel Landy and I'm a postdoctoral fellow with the Drum and Sash project. And I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Candice.
I'm Candice Ogilvie. I am the Red Deer Drum and Sash coordinator.
And Ray.
My name is Ray St. Denny. I'm the Executive Director of Shining Mountains Living Community Services located in Red Deer.
Here is our conflict of interest disclosure. And I'll send it to Ray.
So why do we need to have a Métis cultural response? We've been asked that. So until we began this work, there were very few culturally appropriate resources to address HIV and STBBIs for Métis people. This has created an illusion for some of our members in the communities that HIV and STBBIs doesn't affect us. Creating Métis specific resources is important for creating awareness that HIV and STBBIs are real issues for our communities. What makes up a Métis cultural response? Through our partnership with the Drum and Sash project, we have begun developing and exploring what our cultural response could look like. Through dialogue with leaders in our communities, including elders and others, we have identified things such as culture, protocol development, the inclusion of language and ceremony as part of our cultural response to HIV, HCV, and STBBIs. But more on this in a moment. Rachel will first explain a bit about Drum and Sash.
The Drum and Sash project is a CIHR-funded study which aims to develop, implement, and evaluate shared care models to increase care and prevention for HIV, hepatitis C, and other sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections. In Métis, represented by the Sash, and First Nations, represented by the Drum communities in Alberta. Using a community-led approach, we are supporting communities to address their priorities in HIV, HCV, and STBBI prevention and care.
Community readiness is a way to determine the level of stigma and readiness in a community. It can be used for a variety of issues. We used it to explore our community's level of readiness to respond to issues surrounding HIV. Based on our score, we have begun to develop a response that meets the community where they are at and increase their knowledge and acceptance of people living with HIV. Using community readiness tool, we found that people didn't think that HIV was a problem in our community because there was nothing Métis specific in the resources or data. We also found that many people were uncomfortable talking about their sexual health and sexual relationships. These words were considered dirty by many as they came from a dirty place, often linked to learned colonization.
Building from what we learned through community readiness assessments, we began to develop a Métis-specific response to address HIV and sexual health in our communities. We brought together Métis youth, elders, and people with lived experience and held circles to discuss the impact of language and culture. Emerging from our cultural circle discussions, we began creating a holistic pictorial model of Métis health based on the Red River cart and the things that you would have needed to pack for a journey to wellness. This model is grounded in Métis conceptualization of wellness. It uses Métis imagery to represent factors that contribute to health and well-being. As you can see here, each of these components has been described by English and Cree Michif names. This was important and challenging because it was difficult to translate English words into Cree Michif because some of the words didn't exist. There are no words or concepts for harm reduction or goals in Cree Michif. So the use of the York boat, for example, was chosen to represent goals, as the York boat was traditionally used to get somewhere, and the musket was chosen to represent harm reduction, as it was traditionally used for protection of our communities.
In addition to creating a Métis wellness model and all our learnings based on the work we have done to create a cultural response to HIV, HCV, and STBBIs, we piloted and evaluated a Métis-specific approach to dry blood spot testing for STBBIs and continue to develop Métis-specific resources. We have also created the Métis Wellness Advisory Circle to guide our work. This circle is comprised of youth and elders and those with lived experience. This circle will guide our priorities as we continue to develop a Métis cultural response to HIV, HCV, and STBBIs.
Métis people are unique. We have our own culture, our own history, our own language, our own ways of looking at things. In order for Métis people to engage in prevention and treatment, they have to believe it affects them. If they see resources that are clearly Métis, that will catch their attention. Having a visible Métis response will undoubtedly increase the number of Métis people who choose to engage. Having a response that reflects Métis values is intended to increase the number of Métis people who consider engaging. Thank you for your time and consideration. Hi, Marcy. Please find our contact information on this slide. We look forward to your questions.